to be recognized by the chair. One person may provide public comment only once per agenda item. Public comments are limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Public comments are limited to the item being considered by the committee. The chair may disregard or terminate any public comment that does not comply with this paragraph. Attendees of the meeting can obtain general continuing education hours. An email regarding continuing education credit will be sent within 30 days following the meeting. So now we're going to call the meeting to order and have a roll call. Click the last one. Oh, no, mind. Okay, roll call. Candice Saraparu, present. Tanyaka Klein. Sorry, I said it wrong still. Okay. Present. Oh, I'm sorry.
I say present.
Yeah. Darlene Brooks Sandville. All right. And so we're going to approve the agenda. The agenda is as follows. Call the meeting to order, roll call, brief introductions of committee members, purpose of the committee, overview of the Interstate Compact, overview of telehealth regulations and best practices, next steps, committee assignments, schedule the next meeting and adjourn. I need a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion. I make a motion to approve the agenda.
And I second. All right. And so brief introductions. I'm Candice Saraparu. I'm a board member from LaPlace, Louisiana, and I am the chair of this committee.
I am Tanyaka Klein from Ponchatoula, Louisiana, and I'm a board member of this committee.
All right. And the purpose of this committee is to discuss the regulatory impacts of the Interstate Compact, which is still being decided as far as state licensing, and then the telehealth regulations and identify best practices. We'll entertain public comment at this time. Does anyone have any comment regarding the agenda or the purpose of the committee?
Raise
your hand. Thank you.
And we have Karen Harrington that has raised her hand.
Hi, Karen, you're being recognized. Karen Harrington, can you hear me?
I'm sorry, that was a mistake.
Oh, sorry. Okay, no problem. Anyone else have a public comment? Raise your hand.
No hands raised.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on. So the Interstate Compact, it is a lengthy document, but I think it would do good for us to review the document for the public, section by section. Have you had a chance to read it? Okay. All right. And so we're not going to read the document in its entirety, but we will talk about each section and what it covers. So section 1 is the purpose, and I'm going to read that for the benefit of the public. The purpose of the compact is to facilitate interstate practice of regulated social work by improving access to competent social work services. The compact preserves the regulatory authority of states to protect public health and safety through the current systems of state licensure. The compact is designed to achieve the following objectives: A, increase public access to social work services; B, reduce overly burdensome and duplicate requirements associated with holding multiple licenses; C, enhance the member states' ability to protect the public's health and safety; D, encourage the cooperation of member states in regulating multi-state practice; E, promote mobility and address workforce shortages by eliminating the necessity for licenses in multiple states by providing the mutual recognition of other member states; F, support military families; G, facilitate the exchange of licensure and disciplinary information among member states; H, authorize all member states to hold regulated social workers accountable for abiding by member states' laws, regulations, and applicable professional standards in the member state in which client is located at the time of the care is rendered. I, allow for the use of telehealth to facilitate increased access to regulated social work services. And so that's why this committee is addressing both telehealth and interstate compact, because of the fact that by interstate compact, it would allow multi-state licensure. At this time, I don't know if any states have actually signed on. Emily, are you aware of who signed on?
There are states that have legislation that's passed.
Oh, it's right, okay.
Mhm. You have to have at least 7 states
Mhm.
with legislation passed for the social work compact for it to move forward.
Okay,
So the town hall meeting that NASW is sponsoring
Mhm.
next week,
Tuesday, I think.
right, will be giving us an update about how the legislation's going to be introduced,
Mhm.
where they're at with that.
Okay,
And then this committee would write any rules or guidelines, whatever your recommendations are, that the board would need to promulgate.
okay. And so we're not gonna talk about promulgation today, but we do know that's a process, and that's why we're trying to work toward having that, the guidance of the board in a timely manner. So the main thing is that this would allow social workers to work outside of their home state, right? It's still gonna continue to have that the services or whatever state the client is in, that's where the services are provided. But but you still have to have all the rules and requirements of the Louisiana state license.
It just keeps you from having to become licensed in that state. You're using your Louisiana license instead of porting to different locations.
Right, and so I know there's a lot of social workers who have multiple licenses or have licenses in multiple states. This would eliminate that requirement because you would have the Louisiana license and then the compact licensure. And so for us, as far as the purpose seems clear. Is there anything that you think of when you read the purpose about regulation?
Basically, what we just discussed is pretty straightforward.
Right. And so part 2 gives a whole bunch of definitions. And the main definitions that we need to consider are home state. And so home state is the state where the social worker is primarily living at the time. And at this point, for the most part, that's not how we, you get licensed in every state. It's not necessarily the state that you live in. And so when a social worker leaves the state or moves, that's something we would have to consider is then they would have to change home states. Because currently we have social workers who live in other states and have a Louisiana license, right? And they have license in all these different states, but they never designate, like home state would be something new that designated. So wherever you actually primary residence is, that would have to be your home state.
And that makes sense.
So how, I guess my question is, how would the board know where your home state is?
On your driver's license.
Is that something we currently look at? No.
No.
Well, I mean, we have endorsement applications where we look at their license that they have in another state when they apply for a license here through that avenue.
When you move, you don't have to alert the board that you've moved and you're no longer a resident of Louisiana.
You need to alert the board if you want to maintain your license so that we can contact you if necessary.
Mhm.
But it's not like a violation or
Right.
anything if you
And so I guess that's one of the things I think about is like, as far as with the compact, when you move, every time you move, you have to tell the board, this is not my home state anymore. And then,
I think that is in our policy or rules about informing the board when you move.
right, but we don't have the home state rule. So you
Right.
still keep your license and you just tell them you moved.
Correct.
But once you move, then we're no longer the regulatory state for you under the compact. Unless I'm reading that wrong. Are y'all,
But in
am I
order
wrong with
to-
reading it that way?
Practice, they still would have to have license in whatever state they're moving to. So if I relocate to Atlanta, I cannot practice in Atlanta with my Louisiana license. I would have to.
With the
contact the
multi-state
board.
compact, you would be able to practice in every state that,
But that wouldn't become my home, that would become my home state,
right?
right?
That's something that we don't have a rule about. It's something that I'm thinking that
We would need a rule about.
we might, I don't know.
Let me offer this, just, it's gonna possibly the home state be the state of which that credential was, initially granted. So, for instance, you achieved a clinical level license in Louisiana, but the compact is with Mississippi and you go to Mississippi, but then would Louisiana still be considered?
So the definition says the home state is the state that your licensee is primarily domiciled in.
Okay.
Yeah, so with that, that's a change that we would have to possibly think about as far as a rule. Because again, before now, when you move, you notify the board that you've moved,
Yeah.
but we don't necessarily, we still regulate you. Under the interstate compact, you're regulated in the domicile state. And so that's the confusion as far as regulation that I'm having with the compact, as far as, you know what I mean? But the rest of the definitions, again, basically, multi-state license means that you're practicing a home state with authority to practice in other states. Your authorized privileges. There is and the exam committee talked about this morning, the fact that the interstate compact does require that you have passed that qualifying national exam. And I know there's a lot of debate on that. As far as the state participation, the state compact, a state has to have, we have to have a regulating board, we have that. So section 3 is just about the state participation in the compact, which is the things that the state has to have to be eligible. Section 4 is about the social work participation in the compact. You have to maintain your license to practice. You have to agree to abide by the laws in the state in which the client is located at the time of services. You have to do a criminal background check and then pay all required fees. And I'm not sure of what the fees are.
It should vary by state, right? Or.
Well, there's gonna be your state licensing fee, but then there's the multi-state compact licensing fee. And so that's something that I don't have information on. And then it's the same thing, the licensing exam, whatever the clinical requirements of your home state. And so one of the questions is, what about when states have different requirements than we have?
So if they have different requirements, if this is their home state, should they follow the guidelines of the home state, or?
That's, I guess, the question for us to think about. And these are things that, again, we're just getting started. So things to think about what about when the state has have different requirements? For instance, I know Florida and Georgia have more hour requirements than we do. I think Texas as well.
If you agree to join the compact, you agree to recognize the license.
Okay.
Because you can only be part of the compact if you've met the standards listed by that legislation. Yeah.
Okay.
So all of these types of questions, I believe, would be answered by the
It is W.
appropriate people to answer those questions. What we should be doing is looking at, have any other social work boards started promulgating rules? And what do those rules look like?
And so I looked, New York was starting, but that was some of the questions they had as far as the difference. Hi, how are you? At the end. The paper. We're gonna take a 2-second pause to acknowledge Ms. Darlene is here and just catch up. We just going over the compact and reading it and coming up with some. So I looked, so as Emily's saying, like, what are other states doing? And some of those things were those questions that's what, I noticed New York's board was already doing it. Minnesota as well's board was already discussing it. But in New York, that was some of their questions about, obviously, like you said, if the state signs on, then we have to agree. But that was one of their questions. What about those states that do have different rules as far as from what we have? And so they didn't have an answer in their board minutes as far as that was just kind of where they left, like, these are our questions.
And then also, there are other professions that are part of a compact.
Like, I know the counseling compact is much further than us.
So we can look at those to see what types of things they've already identified as important pieces to have in your rules.
Okay.
Looking at the comparison with other professions.
Yes. So we're not doing that now. That's gonna be one of the things that we're gonna task with. Right now, we're kind of just looking at each category as an overview, because a lot of us have not had the opportunity to read the compact in its entirety. And so for the benefit of the public, I read the purpose. And then we're going through each section by section as far as what things we might need to consider. And some things that Emily's pointing out, no, we don't have to think about that part, because once we agree to the compact, that will already have been decided. As far as, like, what about states who have different rules than us? I do still think the home state part, because that's when it's something we're gonna have to consider, because of the fact that when a person goes to file a complaint, it has to be done with the home state. And if there's discrepancy on where's the home state. But I think we can look at what other people are doing and other compacts to address that, because we're not the first. So we've done section 1, 2, 3, and 4. So section 5 is about the issuance of the license. So everyone would have to apply for the multi state license. The home state license authority shall determine the applicant's eligibility for multiple state license. And so would that mean that we need more analysts, or like how are the process of procedures? And I don't know if that's something for this committee to be tasked with, or because if the home state is going to be required to, or is this just similar to what we do for endorsement? Is the process going to be the same? That's just a question I have. I don't know at this point.
That's a good question. And I would think once we understand the contract and we know how it's going to work, the committee might recommend that to the board, that they consider having another licensing analyst if they feel that the workload is going to require it. That doesn't mean the board will do it.
Right.
It's just that will be the committee's recommendation.
And maybe I should have said that to be clear. This committee cannot make any rules, laws, we can only make suggestions that will be presented to the full board, right? And so when we're thinking of things, the board may or may not adopt those things. And so then we also will have to issue the license. The home state issues the multi-state license. And obviously just considering the cost of all these things. Because that is gonna be paper and printing, and even though it sounds insignificant, it could be. And then again, it's just the requirement of who is going to be in charge of the multi-state license. So the home state determines the level of licensure, and the home state,
What would be the issue?
the issuer, yeah. They issue the license, they're gonna regulate the license, meaning that if there are any disciplinary action, the home state. And the home state has been determined to be the state in which you are domiciled, like your primary domicile. So one of the questions I had before you came in was, what if you move, how does that work? Because like currently when you move, you keep each state's license the same. But now when you move, the notification has to have another trigger to say, we're no longer your regulating board. All right. And so section 6 is just saying that the compact will not take precedence over each member state's ability to create laws and regulate their practice. The compact state will not to do anything regarding the single state license that everyone will have. And it will not restrict any member state ability to regulate or to restrict or limit licenses. Nor does it stop a remote state from taking action against a licensee. Oh, so section 7 addresses that issue that I was talking about.
Which it was.
Thank you. Yeah. So, section 7 says that when you change your home state, that you must apply in the new state.
So that's how to.
Yeah, so
That's how your home
addresses-
state a change.
Yes. And so it says immediately apply. I would say that we probably should have something that has a time limit, not immediately. I mean, immediately is fine, but I think spelling it out. So I would recommend that we create time limits.
Within 30 days, moving to a new state, it's time to change everything.
And so they may have a previous.
I want to tell you that the public probably can't hear you. So you
Okay.
might need to
Talk louder.
project your voice a little more.
Okay.
The camera is there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the speaker's right there in the
Oh, okay.
ceiling.
You can- Okay,
On that
okay,
side.
okay.
Yeah.
I didn't see it. Okay.
Yeah. And so we could also look at like the previous rules before when you moved. You know, like, did we ever have a rule about that, Emily? As far as transferring licensing
Locating.
alone? Or did people do it before they moved? Like,
Well, so, with the last Practice Act change, we have a statute that says, you must have your I'm not quoting it directly, but this is what it means. You must have your license to practice within 90 days of commencement of providing services.
Okay,
Meaning, you could go to work before you actually have the license
Have it.
issued, as long as you get it within 90 days.
and so I think keeping it in line with that might make
Yeah.
sense.
That makes sense.
And that seems like a reasonable time.
As long as that doesn't get misconstrued as you have to apply within 90 days.
Not
It must-
apply within 90
be
days.
issued.
You have the license
Have your
in
license
hand.
in hand
Yeah,
in 90 days.
and so we would recommend similar language. And then basically, if you move from a state that's in the compact to a state that is not participating in the compact, then you would do what you would traditionally do, which is apply for a license. And you can still have multiple state licenses and have the compact. So if you chose to still continue to do the multiple state license and have a compact license, that's fine. And then there's section 8 is about the military families. And that meaning that if you're a military family, your home state designation stays no matter where you are in active duty. So they don't have to
It doesn't change.
keep changing. And so section 9 is probably where we really need to focus, because that's what the adverse actions, and as far as what we can do as far as a remote state. And I'll read this for the benefit of the public. And this, if you're following along, we're reading from the Interstate Compact, section 9, adverse actions, which is on page 11. In addition to the other powers conferred by state law, a remote state shall have the authority, in accordance with existing state due process law, to take adverse action against a regulated social worker's multi-state authorization to practice only within that member state, and issue subpoenas for both hearings and investigations that require the attendance and testimony of witnesses, as well as the production of evidence. Subpoenas issued by licensing authority in a member state for the attendance and testimony of witnesses or the production of evidence from another member state shall be enforced in the latter state by any court or competent jurisdiction according to the practice and procedure of that court applicable to the subpoenas issued in proceedings pending before it. The issuing licensing authority shall pay any witness fees, travel expenses, mileage, and other fees required by the service statutes of the state in which the witnesses or evidence are located. And then part 2 is only a home state shall have the power to take adverse action against a regulated social worker's multi-state license. And so in summation, you can still have adverse action in that state, but they can't revoke your license. So if there's adverse action within that state, then us as the home state may still need to take action against that, depending on the infraction. And so we would probably, and again, not today, but come up with recommendations for if the infraction was depending, on the infraction happens in another state, for which we are not a regulatory body. What do we do in that instances? And we'll be looking at, we said, at other interstate compacts of other professions, as far as, and also at what other states who are already further along in this process of regulation on the interstate compact are doing to offer us guidance. All right. So for the purpose of taking adverse action, the home state shall give the same priority and effect to the reported conduct received from a member state as it would if the conduct had occurred within the home state. In doing so, the home state shall apply its own state laws to determine appropriate action. And this one can get a little tricky as far as, because each state has different laws. And it could, I think it's something we need to consider as far as making sure that we don't inadvertently harm, cause harm.
Mhm.
So C said that I'm gonna summarize it, that the home state should still continue the investigation even if the person changes their home state, if they change their domicile. And so there's gonna be a interstate database, I'm assuming. Well, it says in here, and I'm assuming that means that this board administration is going to have to monitor that database as well, in addition to the other duties that they're doing. Okay. And we may get to it as far as what information is going to be kept in that database. But, let's see. And so D is about the member state being able to cover the cost of the investigation, which is pretty typical in any type of investigation. But E is something that I just think we should highlight, that the member states may take action based on findings from another member state. So it sounds almost like a domino effect. Like if you have an issue in one state, other states can also have issue with you. And so something just to consider, how do we address that? And what would be our recommendations after we look and see what other people are doing? And so they can have joint investigations. It almost sounds like a witch hunt, right? It sounds
Like a domino effect.
Yeah, it says like there may be multiple, states who join in the investigation, and they shall share any investigative, litigation, or compliance material in the furtherance of any joint or individual investigation initiated under the compact. If adverse action is taken against the home state, against the multi-state license of a regulated social worker, the regulated social worker's multi-state authorization to practice in all other member states shall be deactivated until all encumbrances have been removed from the multi-state license. And again, back to I almost want to say, whose job will it be to make sure that these flags are removed, in a timely manner, to not encumber somebody's license and ability to earn a living. So as I'm reading this, the other thing I'm thinking is, will all of this be wrote into the same current database as far as, like now we use CertaMe, or whatever we're using next, or are we going to have two separate systems that we're going to be navigating? I know you don't know. I don't know either. It's just one of those things to think about, because as we saw with the integration of technology into the licensing, that had a lot of hiccups.
Yes, it did.
I'm trying to say it nicely. I'm trying to, and so I want to make sure that we avoid, like, we have a system in place for if there is a hiccup.
Just being proactive.
Because
based on experience.
Right. Because they're saying, like, okay, if I remove the flag in a Louisiana license platform, is it automatically going to remove over there, and vice versa for all the states? Or will we look up and somebody's like, I fixed that in Mississippi, but Mississippi didn't take it out. And so we're looking at it saying, well, it's still showing up, you can't practice. And because these are searchable databases to the public as well as to employers, those kind of mistakes can cost you a job. So just a thought of how is this data system that they're talking about, how is it gonna be handled to make sure that, obviously, we worry about the protection of the public, but as far as the social workers. Because it seems like a lot of moving pieces, and most boards or board administration don't have as many people, like most nationwide, they're not these huge corporations, regulatory boards. They're very limited staff, and so I don't want to put undue burden on staff. All right. That's all of it is. All right. And then there's a commission to again another. So each state will have one person on this commission to act jointly and vote on all these things. And the delegate will either be a member of the board or an administrator or a designee. And then you'll have terms. And so that's pretty straightforward as far as the service on the commission. And all the things that the commission is going to be able to do, all the different powers. And these are things that we don't have to discuss because if the compact is approved, that has no bearing on this board or this committee, as far as what that other committee can do. The executive committee is the same. And the executive committee will have their all right, so we'll get a meeting every year. If we choose to be a member state, we'll get a annual report on the on the compact, so that we'll be able to monitor if it is doing what it says to do. So I'm going to just skip to part 11 because that's the data system that I was talking about. So it's going to be a different unique identifier in that data system. And section C talks about the information that they're going to have in that data system. Identifying information, licensure data, adverse actions against the licensee, non-confidential information related to alternative program participation, any denial of application for licensure and the reason for such denial, it's the responsibility, E1, it's the responsibility of the member state to report adverse actions against a licensee and to monitor the database to determine whether adverse actions have been taken against a licensee. Adverse action information pertaining to a licensee in any member state will be available to any other member state. So basically they're saying it would be each state's responsibility to stay up on that database. And then the next section is about how the commission will make rules. Section 13 is about how their oversight and the dispute resolution and enforcement. And this is more pertaining to the state participation in the compact than to individual social workers.
Just to go back to, the data system, see the information that will be shared in the system. Want to make sure we at least look at some regulations of how it's shared, that it's factual information that's been identified as true, and not just because the investigation is open. Because I see where it says the presence of current significant investigation information, but what information is actually shared?
And so we'll look at what other states are doing and as far as what they share. And so it sounds like you're saying until it's been determined, we should not report that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. You look like you're taking notes. Are we going at a pace that's good for you?
I believe so.
Okay.
Well.
Okay. All right. So like I said, moving on to, we were looking at dispute resolution. And again, these are all according to the state. It's not for a specific social work. So it's like if a member state has an issue, how should they resolve it? We'll go on to the contract. So it's the 7th member state. Whenever they get 7 states, then this compact will become effective. And if the first 7 states are going to be the charter states, I don't know where we're going to be in as far as Louisiana, but that's basically saying how we withdraw from the compact against the state. And then 16 is conflict with other state laws. Licensees providing service in a remote state under a multi-state authorization to practice shall adhere to the laws and regulations, including laws, regulations, and applicable standards of the remote state where the client is located at the time care is rendered. Nothing herein shall prevent or inhibit enforcement of any other law of a member state that is not inconsistent with the compact. Any law, state regulation, or other legal requirements in a member state in conflict with the compact are suspended to the extent of the conflict. All permissible agreements between the commission and the member states are binding in accordance with their terms. And so that is the compact summarized. And there's a couple of things that we have noted that we're going to look at. And as we start to look at that, we may come up with other information. I know like I mentioned in New York and their board meeting, one of the things they were talking about is just the how do we possibly mitigate any unintentional harm to social workers by kind of expanding that workforce burden on maybe even rural social workers in places where the compensation rates are higher than what they are here, right? And so what they were thinking is that, I'm kind of summarizing it, but that maybe once this compact is agreed to, New York companies might rush to southern states to hire social workers at the southern states pay salary to, and they didn't have a solution, but it was something that they were trying to figure out how to make sure they protect social workers from that, because that you know, especially in places like here where our salaries are much different than New York.
Right.
You know, offering us a little bit more than what we make here might sound like a great idea. And then you find out,
It's gonna be the same.
well, unintentionally you harm New York social workers.
Right.
Right? Because of that. And so like not making sure, like the Interstate Compact is intended to increase access to the public to competent social work services. It is not intended to harm social workers or create capitalist competition
Right.
among social workers, right? And so I don't know if there's a way as for any board to address that, right? Because we don't regulate businesses. But it is something to consider, especially if you know, if as we're discussing these things, just to kind of have it into the room and bring it into the discussion of how do we ensure that, because we don't know what the going rate are in every state as far as reimbursement. We know, you're kind of familiar with your own state. And so how do you make sure that they are not that businesses aren't doing harmful practices to social workers, which in essence does harm the public, because if you burn out social workers,
Right.
right?
Not gonna have anybody to provide services.
Right. Other than that, anything that y'all had thought about? I know you joined in late, so for the public, we introduced ourselves. You can just do a brief introduction. We're backing up on the agendas, so you can do a brief introduction of yourself.
Okay, I'm Dr. Darlene Brooks Sandville. What do you want me to share?
Whatever you want to share. We didn't share very much.
Okay. Well,
Where
I'll
we
share
from?
that.
Yeah.
I'm from New Orleans. I actually work at the Excelled in New Orleans, and I also have a private practice. I'm on several organizations. I'm actually with Tanaka with New Orleans Black social workers.
Oh,
I am in the Mystic Crew of M. Patel.
that's how you
One of
come.
our crew.
Yeah. That's good enough. I just and so obviously you both, volunteered, and we appreciate that, and came out on a Friday after Mardi Gras, and appreciate that as well. So I know you had thoughts on this, and so before I'm gonna have a public comment period on this topic, because we're moving on to the next one. So if you have something to say on the Interstate Compact, something you want us to consider, please raise your hand. But I also want to give the committee members a chance to talk about why they wanted to be on this committee.
I wanted to be on the committee because I think this is a great opportunity for the social workers here in the state of Louisiana, and it would avoid you from having to port your license to different locations by being able to practice in multiple states.
Okay.
And I chose to do this because I actually am licensed in more than one state. And I do see it a benefit to the public being licensed in one state. And if we can create a platform that allows that process to, operate smoothly, where social workers can, be licensed in more than one state, I think that would be, really just a, great opportunity for the public and the social worker as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And we're going to definitely, are you licensed in more than one state as well?
No.
I am not either. So we're going to rely heavily on you regarding licensure in more than one state, and anything pitfalls that maybe we need to look at from a regulatory standpoint specifically. Emily, do we have any hands raised?
Yes.
Yes.
Several. Chantel Matthews.
Chantel Matthews, you're being recognized. 2 minutes. Chantel Matthews, can you hear me?
That's okay about my question.
You sure?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Next person.
Dana Burrell.
Dana Burrell, you're being recognized.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. I actually put the question in the chat as well, but my question is, if this goes into play, which I really hope it does, and let's say I have the compact license and I move to another state that is not a part of the compact, what happens then? Because you mentioned something about your home state. You're no longer regulated by the particular state you live in when you move. So if you were to move, would that affect the compact for the individual when they move?
So we have to follow the regular protocol and register with that state board.
And so we're gonna note your question and we're gonna address, we're just getting started as a committee and we don't wanna tell you a factual misfacts. So we'll note your question.
Oh, no, I definitely understand. I didn't know if that was
And so
something
what
you all
I'm
knew or
doing is I'm
not.
making note of it so that we can make sure we get
Okay.
factual information and address it. So what happens when you move to a non-member state? Is your question, right?
Right, and you already are part of the compact. Yeah, I just was wondering about that.
That's a great
Did that affect-
question. That's a great question.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Next
Thank you.
person.
Andrea Clark.
Andrea Clark, you're being recognized.
Hello. Just wanted to add a few pieces for us to consider. I am currently in LMSW under LCSW supervision. So I don't know if this is something y'all can answer now or maybe add for a future meeting, but how could this benefit or impact LMSWs under supervision, under LCSW supervision? Personally, myself, I've been considering travel social work. I'm very interested in it. However, I know that the social work profession is limited as far as having to apply for all of these licensures and different things. So personally, myself, I've considered switching professions that don't make it as difficult to consider travel as part of the profession, because there's so many barriers that come into play in the social work profession when you have your own career goals set, right? Kind of puts a ceiling on us. And it has you considering, oh, what profession can I maybe transition to? I love social work, definitely don't want to transition to another profession, but I can't say I haven't considered it due to the limitations that we have when it comes to licensures in other states. So another thing is natural disasters. In New Orleans, we're affected often by natural disasters. I've thought, well, hey, if a severe hurricane hits again, how hard will it be for me to be able to get work in other states, and what will I have to go through for that? That's kind of unclear. So I think we would benefit from having this compact licensure in situations like that as well.
Thank you. We have noted your comment. Thank you.
Mark DeBoard.
Mark DeBoard, you're being recognized.
Hello, thank you. I put my comments in the chat, but as I understand it, this compact really is about telehealth. It's not about all these other work options, which if we're limiting it to that, a couple of things. One, makes sense to me that the home state would be where you'd be licensed, but it'd also be where you primarily work. So if you're working close to a state line, you might live in the other state, but your office, let's say, or where you work out of would be in your home state, where you'd be primarily licensed. So that's a consideration. And then when you move, we have reciprocity laws and rules already. And so, yes, the way it stands now, you'd probably need to get licensed in that other state to practice. And that would become your home state. And if they were part of the compact, great. If they weren't, well, then you would be, that you'd be working under those rules. And maybe the out of the box thing that I'd like to consider is instead of thinking of where the client is where you're providing service, that is where the provider is, or where their home state is. And the reason I say that is if I go to Texas for medical treatment right now, and I go in somebody's office over there, they don't have to worry about Louisiana licenses. They're licensed in Texas to provide that service. Same thing, I live in North Louisiana, and so I see people from Arkansas and Mississippi, but they have to come to me to do that. And I can't really do telehealth with them that way. But it would also eliminate these other states from having to regulate the provider. If they had a complaint from a state member, then they could take that up with the provider's home state. Anyway, just some thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you. Next person.
Michelle Strickland.
Michelle Strickland.
Hello, everyone. So one question that I had was, are you all considering to only have the compact license for only have it for LCSWs and not LMSWs?
According so according to the rules, it says anyone who has a license. So it doesn't look like it is saying it says clinical masters or bachelors as long as they have they're regulated. So according to the definition, but we can definitely address that in future meetings.
Thank you.
Nicole Meredith.
Nicole Meredith, you're being recognized.
Hello and good afternoon. So I'm a LCSW. I was licensed in California. I lived there for 21 years. I've now relocated to Louisiana and I've been endorsed now. So I've gone through Louisiana Board of Social Works process and had all my paperwork sent from California, whatnot. So I'm also able now to practice in Louisiana, which is great. I'm looking forward to being able to use my license as I work at a brick and mortar, but also at some point I'm building a private practice. And I was made aware that as long as I'm licensed in California, I can serve anybody in California. So that really opens me up for being able to provide services. With this new compact, will folks who went through the endorsement process continue as such and sort of be grandfathered in, or will we have to go through a whole different process?
And so it's not going to be grandfathered. It's going to be similar to how you said endorsement, but we're still in the process of figuring out what will be the process of getting that endorsement. But the home state will will administer the multi-state license if you choose to apply. So it's not going to be more hoops.
Okay. So right now I'm already licensed in California. That's where I took my nationals and whatnot. And I'm able to work in Louisiana now through the endorsement process. What I think I hear you saying is there won't be much of a change from that once this compact goes through. Is that what I'm hearing?
If the compact is agreed upon, and then you would apply for, like when you renew your Louisiana license, you would also apply for a multi-state license. And if you meet the criteria for the multi-state license, you would be issued that as well.
Okay. And who would oversee the multi-state license?
Your home state.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
But you did bring up an interesting point, so I'm going to know what is going to be that process. Because right now, so thank you. We're going to make a note about that as far as recommendations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Rian Janu.
I apologize if I'm saying it wrong, but Rian Janu.
Hi, my name is Rian Janu. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Currently, I am reinstating my license in Texas. And so with me being licensed in Louisiana and Texas, I'm required to do CEUs in both states. So I'm wondering with the compact, will the requirement be to submit my CEUs to all of the states that I'm licensed in, or once I submit them to Louisiana, that would be sufficient?
And so that is going to be, if you can choose to continue to have 2 state licenses, you would still continue to operate the same. And then you would also have a multi-state license so it would be almost as if you had 3 licenses. You can choose to do that according to the compact, to continue to have Louisiana and Texas license, as well as have the multi-state license. But with the multi-state license, whoever your home state is, they would approve that multi-state license for you at the renewal period.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
That was all.
That was all. All right, we thank you for public comment, and we have taken note. You brought up some very interesting points that this committee will look to address. All right, so next up on the agenda is the overview of the telehealth regulations and best practices. So the current rule, as it stands, is, for some reason, my computer's not working, y'all. I don't know, Emily, my computer has just decided to die on me. The current telehealth rule, do you have access to it to read what it says on the website?
It's not a rule.
I know, I know. I didn't want to say it that way, but I wanted to read exactly what it says on the website. If you had access to, if you don't, that's fine, because my computer's starting back up.
This is it.
Thank you. All right, thank you. So the current message on electronic social work practice is that the Louisiana State Board of Social Work Examiners recognizes that face-to-face contact for the purposes of providing services is optimal, but that is not always possible. The Louisiana Social Work Practice Act and rules, standards, and procedures do not include requirements specific to telemental health. The same statutes and rules that apply to in-person services apply to services being provided through electronic means. It is the responsibility of the social worker to practice within their scope and assess whether telemental health is an appropriate service for a particular client. If a client is in another state, it is recommended that you contact that state's licensing board to determine if licensing is required in the state that you provide services to the client. The following is a resource for you to review, and it's the ASWB's Technology Standards and Social Work Practices. So we don't have I don't know when this was written, but we do need to have an update, right? Because, and it says that face-to-face, and that, language is one of those things that we highly debate. And so I will debate that face-to-face includes Zoom. And so we say face-to-face for the content is optimal, but it's not always possible. But I would, again, being very picky, argue that telehealth is face-to-face. And so we have to make sure that we make recommendations for the board that reflects the current status that we're in and the future that we are going to. So you all have been provided with a list of what other states are doing, of all 50 states for teletherapy. And so we're not going to focus on the states that do not have any specifics. We're going to look at the states that have some type of guidance for us to look at what's best practices. And so the first state that does have some type of guidance is they permit it, Arkansas, and that they let individuals working under supervision for licensure provide telehealth as well. And so their rules are very, very brief, and they go along with what we say. They should be held in the same standards of care as traditional in-person encounters, and that they should work within their scope of practice. And then so DC made a policy, but it was an emergency policy. And they defined it a lot. Okay, so I'm gonna fast forward to Georgia because Georgia has a specific rule that requires that you can do teletherapy services but you have to complete 6 continuing education hours focused on administering telehealth. They define what a licensee means, and then they define what everything, the requirements. And they define what continuing education requirements. And so I think when we created the spreadsheet, one of the things that we were looking at is not just whether or not a state allows it, but whether they allow a person who doesn't have an independent license to provide it. So that's why you see permitted, and then you see the information about someone working under a clinical license or working on their clinical license, right? So whether or not a person who has, who is under supervision for clinical licensure can provide those services. So a couple of states do require continuing education focused on telehealth. I noticed Georgia and Maryland both do. For some of them are calling it electronic social work services. Virginia also requires continuing education.
I think some of them also are inclusive of LMSWs, not just the
independent life.
yeah.
And so the purpose of this discussion are what do we think are best practices, or what are best practices as we have identified from looking at other states? Currently there is no rule. And so then will be our advice as far as to the board regarding if they need a rule. So maybe we can start with a discussion on that. Because if you look, there's a large number of states who don't have rules. And they offer guidance like we were doing. And so what are your thoughts on a rule?
Thoughts on the rule as it relates to the necessities?
Right, so this is what we have current now. We have guidance, but we don't have a rule. And so before we start saying, well, what do we need the rule to be? First, we need to decide, do we need a rule? We need it.
No, it sounds like the guidance should be enough.
And so as I said,
It goes into details.
Oh, the guidance doesn't go into.
You don't think?
I don't think it does. I mean, if you read it, you could tell it was, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. Yeah, the guidance doesn't go into detail. I think the guidance was possibly written before most people, the majority, are doing telehealth. Mm-hmm. And so I would say, you had something to say, Emily?
I was going to just give a little historical information.
Well, we would love historical information.
Those guidelines were written many years ago. So many years ago, a sitting board thought that guidelines regarding teletherapy and electronic practice were needed. And they started working on it. Now, anytime a committee writes rules, we always send it to our attorney to do a legal sufficiency review. And the attorney at that time said, you didn't need separate rules because and this was a long time ago, okay? Because our current standards of practice already address confidentiality and that, the board can discipline your license if you breach confidentiality. The rules already talk about practicing within your competence. So if you're going to provide this type of therapy, you should be competent in that area. And if you're not, the board can discipline your license. So because of that legal opinion, the committee disbanded and no rules were promulgated.
But I think at that time, we weren't doing therapy on our phones.
Yeah, like I said, it was like a totally different time.
Like now, now the times have changed, and the purpose of the rule, or even I would say, if not a rule, we should definitely adjust the guidance.
Yeah,
because the guidance is.
Yeah, so the guidance was written at
Written at a time where,
since they weren't going to promulgate rules.
Yeah, I mean, I think telehealth existed, but it was limited. I remember when I first started practicing, telehealth was like something that you couldn't just do on your phone. Like we didn't even have cell phones like that. So, so telehealth existed, but the nature of the technology required so much that it wasn't going to be ever a time where you're going to be in the mall doing a telehealth session. And I'm not talking about from the therapist standpoint, I'm talking about from the client. The client still had to come into, we did telehealth for psychiatrists. The client still had to come into the office on this big bulky TV that we had.
Yeah.
So it wasn't going to be a thing where, we still had that kind of, we knew the client was there, the client got checked in, all of those things that's going away with now. And I do know that clients have, the accessibility of telehealth is so wonderful. That you don't want to put any kind of rule that restricts it. But I think guidance might be helpful. But for those that have rules, I do think rules are great too. But we just don't. So I don't want to sway either way. I want to hear your thoughts about rule versus updating the guidance, or maybe updating the guidance and then
determine if rules are
necessary. Like maybe it'd be a mixture of both.
I think we should start with updating the guide. And then see if we need to add additional rules to it, or add rules to it.
All right. So the guidance is, the first sentence says that we think face-to-face for the purposes of providing services is optimal, but not always possible. I'm scratching that whole sentence. So what do you think as far as best practices? We're saying guidance, so what are we gonna say is best? And we don't have to, obviously, we're not gonna, in this meeting today, come up with everything. It's more of a fleshing out, because we also have to have support for what we're saying is best practices.
And I think looking at also the rules, we can pull from some of the states their rules and create.
So maybe I would say defining what electronic social work practice is. Have we defined that anywhere in our Laws and Practice Act?
I'm pulling up
Okay.
because I think we do have some.
I think we did have some information, but because again, like I said, that face-to-face thing is debated, and so I feel like clear language on what we mean. Because if you say, well, face-to-face is best, but not always possible, then what else am I using?
It could be referring to maybe telephonic, using the phone.
Telephonic isn't reimbursable. So
yeah.
I mean, you could do it. I don't think, as last I checked, I don't think it's reimbursable. A definition of electronic social work practice?
It was reimbursable during
COVID with emergency, but you had to document, you tried other ways. But that's gone now. Those emergency provisions are gone.
Here's something. It just says this is from the standards. It says electronic social work practice, use of computers, including the internet, social media, online chat, text, and email, and other electronic means such as smartphones, landline telephones, and video technology to provide the public to provide information to the public, deliver social work services to clients, communicate with clients, manage confidential information and case records, store and access information about clients, and lastly, arrange payment for professional services. That's what we have.
That's not what we have currently in our.
Yes, chapter 3, general provisions under 301, section 301 definitions. So we have something.
We also have a definition of remote under 301 as well. Remote meaning provision of social work services where the social worker is not physically located at the site where the services are received. The distance between the social worker and the recipient of services is not a consideration.
We give a very extensive list for the definition of electronic social work services. And some of those things are not HIPAA compliant. Like you can't provide electronic social work services by chat.
Nor Facebook,
No, not by social media either. So I think for the purposes of guidance, kind of spelling out, like how they started off with the LABSWE recognized that face-to-face contact for the purpose of providing services is optimal, but not always possible. Maybe saying LABSWE recognizes that electronic social work practice is a reality and this is guidance. You know what I mean? That versus trying to say like, we're not trying to dissuade you from doing it.
Mm-hmm.
We actually, again, encourage it because it is best practice. I mean, it is helpful for the public, but this would be what we have found our best practices, and then we would have to find best practices. You opened every possible tab. All right.
And I think that'll be important to define the best practices.
Mm-hmm. So, looking at what other states are doing. But Virginia has a guidance document that we can look up for their telehealth services within their law. Well, theirs is a guidance, it's not a law. Because they don't have a regulation. So if you look at Virginia, it's the telehealth guidance statement.
DC also has a guidance.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so we can look at what they're offering for guidance. One thing I noticed is for those that have guidance is the consistency that telehealth must be restricted to people residing in the state. And what we say is you should contact the other state's licensing board to determine if the license is required. And I think that's something that has been up for discussion is can we, like notwithstanding the Interstate Compact has not been assigned, has not been endorsed yet, right? If you're providing telehealth services with your Louisiana license to a person in another state, how is that regulated? If you don't have a license within that state, because that state, for whatever reason, does not require you to have a license. So, and I'm not talking about from the independent license people, I'm talking about people under supervision. Not every state has licensing for people in supervision.
I'm sorry, Candice, can you say again, just before that, you had said, you had noticed that the states that had a statement on guidance, and then what was the rest of that? You noticed that.
Oh, that they all say that the licensee shall only provide telehealth services within their state, located within. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Virginia says all social work providing social work or teletherapy or therapy via telehealth to persons have to be resided within Virginia.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yes.
So that they kind of remove that gray area. What shall we do? And looking at time, because this meeting ends at 3:30. I want us to do kind of assign tasks, but I did want to have at the end a very brief public comment on teletherapy, as it more so if you have things that you want this committee to look at than to ask the committee for answers to your specific questions. Because at this point, the committee cannot answer any questions. We're still in that fact-finding phase, not about the interstate compact, specifically about telehealth and telehealth guidance. And so we're gonna just take one or two comments if there are any, and then we'll do tasks and set the next meeting date so that we're finished within our time frame. Is there anyone who has public comment? Raise your hand. Use the raise hand feature.
Gina Rossi.
Gina Rossi, you're being recognized.
Thank you. I have two comments. The first one is this is much more helpful and educational to the public if we also had access to the documents that the committee is looking at, specifically like the comparisons of state comparisons that you have. I also want to point out that as you start to define face-to-face, I think that this would be very important, that if you define this, then I think that it should be defined across the board, so that it is congruent with supervision as well. And I plan to push that. And as soon as this comes through, this I think is going to be a very important statement that you say that face-to-face it comes at this time when it needs to be happening across the state. And also that term face-to-face should also meet the definition for supervision face-to-face. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. As far as the document, I'm not sure if this is something that is publicly available. Do you know?
Well, the social work compact is publicly available.
Yeah, the social work compact is definitely publicly available, and you can find that by going, if you just Google social work compact, it will come up. So thank you for your.
David Gish.
David Gish, you're being recognized.
Hi, this has been really great. Would just like to put out two things. One is in terms of face-to-face requirements versus phone. I work with elderly folks, and a lot of my clients, there's no way they can navigate technology in order to get on Zoom or any other face-to-face technology. So phone is really their only alternative. In terms of telehealth, I would wonder if, and I don't know how this works, but if in the recommendations or requirements in terms of insurance companies, because insurance companies are starting to designate between phone and video, and some of them are not paying for phone. So I'm wondering if the state can actually, or the committee can recommend to the state or whoever regulates that if you're going to provide covered telehealth, you have to do both.
That is not something that this committee has power over as far as insurance company regulation, but we will make note of your comment regarding the phone when we talk about the guidance, because that is a good point. Thank you for your comment.
Susan Garner.
Susan Garner, you're being recognized.
Hello, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate all of the accessibility that telehealth can add, and to piggyback off of David's concerns, what we saw during the pandemic was the big push to telehealth and how that didn't necessarily serve some of the more vulnerable populations who may not have consistent access to telephone, to phone numbers, or to technology, and also those that just can't navigate those technologies. And as more and more providers are moving to these remote platforms, which is, again, a great option to increase accessibility for a lot of people, it's harder to get practitioners out to those rural regions and out to those most shut-in people. And I just wanted to all keep that in mind as well. Like, how do we balance those things? And that may not be under the purview fully of this body, but it's just something to keep in mind as we move more towards tech.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. As you pointed out, it's not under the purview of this body, but we do want to ensure that any guidance we offer does not inadvertently cause any limitations to services to the public or any restriction in the practices, the ethical practice of electronic social work. So thank you for pointing out, making sure that we consider those things. Anybody else?
Eddie Jenkins.
Eddie Jenkins, you're being recognized.
Hello. Myself and someone that just talked a minute ago, Mark DeBoer, we were working for the Louisiana Office of Mental Health whenever telehealth was first spread statewide in that office. And there was policies and procedures developed at that time in writing. So if the board has a relationship with, it's now currently the Office of Behavioral Health, you might contact them so you're not just starting from scratch and see what that policies and procedures manual. And it's probably been updated since the time it was first developed. Just a suggestion.
We appreciate your suggestion. And OBH has most of their policies available online. So that's something that we can look at. Thank you so much for that suggestion. Do you have any?
Susan Garner.
Susan Garner, you're being recognized.
I forgot to put my hand down. Sorry about that.
Problem. Thank you.
That's all.
All right. Thank you all for the public comment. All right. So we have a lot of tasks and takeaways, and we are a small committee. And I'm saying that for not just for the benefit of us, but for the benefit of the public to recognize we are a small committee volunteering to do this work on behalf of social workers and the public. And so we want to be realistic with tasks and timelines, right? So looking at since we just talked about it, there's pressure in my mind, the telehealth regulations, right? Looking deeper into what are best practices. What about looking at what specific trainings or other states requiring? Not that we are saying we're gonna have training. We just want to have information at this point. And I just want to, if anybody's anxiety went up, bring it down. We're not saying that we're gonna make the recommendation for specific training, but I would like to know for those states that are requiring training, what trainings are they requiring specific to telehealth? What technologies are people using as acceptable? What other things y'all want to know? Just so I make sure I get them all down before we start picking what we're gonna do.
That I've written that question down, something that came to mind when they were speaking.
I had questions.
Cannot think of what it is. See if I wrote something to it.
It was a public comment?
Yeah, it was something someone said.
Candice, I don't know if you said this, but ASWB has a section of their website on technology and social work regulation resources.
Thank you. No, I didn't say it. Okay, when you're thinking about your questions. So who wants to take the task of specific training? Looking at which other states are required for specific training and what telehealth training is available for social work.
I can take that.
All right. Right, about the technologies that other states are considering acceptable.
I'll do it.
And then I would look at all the ASW resources and the technology and give a summary of what ASWB recommends. All right, so moving on to the Interstate Compact, it's a lot, right? Some of the things are not within like our ability to, within our scope. I would like everybody on this committee to attend the town hall if it's gonna be virtual. Did you all get the email about it?
Yeah, then I registered for that.
You registered?
I can send it to you, John.
Okay.
I registered.
Okay, good. And so having us all hear it, we can come back with our viewpoint, a vantage point of what we heard. I want to be sure that we look at all the benefits of the Interstate Compact, but I'm always one who wants to say, let's look at the sometimes unintended consequences. And as much as we can, try to be proactive to mitigate those. Looking at other states, we'll continue to look at other states, and I'll continue to comb the publicly available information from what other states are doing regarding the compact, are the regulatory boards. What else do y'all think we need to be looking at?
I think this is a good starting point, not to go too deep and too far into investigating and not have a good focal point. I think after the town hall, we'll probably have
more questions. That's what I was thinking as well.
Okay, and I think that's a fine thing that we say, yes. So, and so we will all also again reread the Interstate Compact with a fine-tooth comb. But yeah, I think that's a great idea to say, let's not overtask ourselves because again, recognizing time constraints. Emily, you may or may not know when, I'm sorry, I put a lot on you, but I appreciate you because usually you do know. Where is Louisiana as far as moving forward? Like, I want to know.
Well, from what I understand from attending the IOC meetings is that Will Francis is in discussions with a legislator to support that bill.
Is it an actual bill?
But I don't believe it's been introduced yet. I think it's still in the discussion phase. And I'm thinking that we're going to get updated on that at the town hall.
And the reason I asked that question is because obviously time is of the essence with this, right? We don't want to be behind it. But if it's not been introduced, we don't have to put the pressure to meet in the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks. You know what I mean?
Well, the hope was that it would be introduced in this
this legislative session?
Yes, this legislative session.
Okay.
Probably should schedule.
So we should schedule a meeting for March, if possible. Okay. And I don't know when this legislative session ends, but look at, we're all like grabbing our phones, probably checking our calendars. I know we got quiet all of a sudden, but that's what happened. We all went to the phone. All right. I selected a Friday because Friday worked good for my schedule.
No, I'm fine with Friday.
Friday works. Which Friday we begin?
I have something on my schedule. I know it's not on here. I'm gonna put it on. Could we do Friday, April 5th, even though I know we said a month? Does that work for everyone?
We could do April.
Does that work?
We can modify the schedule, yeah.
Emily?
Same time.
I'm not, that was checking the board schedule. Yeah, double check.
One second on
I'm
that.
sorry, Blake. When is the board meeting? I wanna.
April
Yeah.
12th is the
Oh,
board
no, no.
meeting.
You said April 5th.
Mm-hmm.
What's the deadline for that one, Emily? The 12th meeting? You have that right in front of you?
Country.
The deadline
Oh,
for
okay.
submitting
Yeah.
documents for the meeting is April 5th.
Okay.
The 5th, it doesn't work for her schedule, so that's fine.
Just that one. Yeah.
All right. April 11th, which is a Thursday, does that work? Because we have the board meeting that Friday, you're saying? Right? Board meeting is Friday?
Yeah, the 12th.
Yes, the next deadline is the 5th and 7th days would be the 12th, which is a Friday, I guess.
The 12th is a Friday. 12th is a Friday. I can make the 11th work for
Should
sure.
the 11th
I
work?
can make the 11th work.
Okay.
Let's do the afternoon of the April 11th. Same time, 1:30 to 3:30. Like, I don't have to, we just adjourn, right? I don't need like a motion to adjourn or.
Emily might, I believe,
You do a motion to adjourn, but you don't need a second. You just adjourn the meeting.
So if we've discussed everything and there's no more business at hand, does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, the meeting has been adjourned.